Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Crit Academy. I am your host, Justin.
And I'm your guest, Matthew Whitby, and we hope to inspire you with creative content that you can bring onto your next adventure.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm your co-host Ian.
And I'm your co-host, Austin.
Thank you guys for joining us today here at Crit Academy Studios, where everything's made up and your roles don't matter.
Yep, that's right. Your roles are like dungeons without any loot.
Which would honestly suck so much.
You know,
It's all about the friendships you make along the way, isn't it?
Or about the XP that I gained for my
I was
monster
going to say,
kills.
you don't kill your friends along the way?
Yeah. But to say, screw friendship, I want gold. Or magic items.
Believe it or not, I'm not the barbarian, and he's not the rogue. It's actually the other way around.
I'm really excited for our show today. We have a special guest with us. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today. Matt
Yeah, absolutely.
Whitby.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've started watching some of your YouTube videos. I loved them, so I wanted to invite him over. You also have a podcast, as well as you are a writer on the Dmsguild, and you've got some pretty cool stuff out there that we'll be talking about here shortly. So I'm really excited for this episode. We're going to be discussing dungeon design. Now,
Somehow we never talked about this.
193 episodes. I haven't covered it.
Yeah,
So
not really sure on this
what
one.
the hell we've been doing for 193 episodes?
You've been keeping above ground.
Yeah.
We didn't cover our fundies. We
right.
didn't cover the fundamentals.
So yeah, we'll be talking about that today. But before all that, we have our Let's Talk About Blank segment, where every week we either answer a question or we find some interesting D&D or RPG related details.
Excuse me.
You're welcome. Or you're excused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the one.
And so I found something really interesting that just really tickles my dice. There is a link on our show notes. You can head over to critacademy.com/post/episode 193, and you will find a link to Bake Adventure with New Dungeons and Dragons Cookbook. It is an article that covers an upcoming Wizards officially licensed cookbook full of all kinds of really neat recipes that you can bring the experience of D&D not just to your tabletop, but to your tabletop in a different format, I guess.
Yeah.
But to your stomachs, and it's called the Heroes Feast, the official D&D cookbook. Matt, did you get a chance to look at this, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I saw the announcement when was it during the last D&D live event, and I must admit it did kind of catch me off guard. But I feel like anything a halfling bakes is probably going to be delicious. So I can pass on all the elven dishes. I think I can get me some pastries, and I think that sounds like a good evening.
See, that's so interesting because I can totally see them. I mean, I don't know how they're going to categorize it when it comes out. It comes out in 2 days from now, which is October 27th. It releases. There's a pre-order link if you want to pick it up. But I think it would be interesting to see if they categorized it by by the races.
The race. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Oh man, what the hell do orcs eat?
Meat.
I mean, yeah. They're probably just gonna get pig, throw fire, done.
You also have to think, because what is it? So with wizards and stuff like that, they're all about conjuring food, and they always say that it tastes particularly bland. Do you think they have a recipe for very bland food?
It's
the
wizard
food that
soup.
is just
It's just water.
That would also be interesting.
Oh my gosh! So
Someone's had to have done it. Just
Maybe.
made really bland food intentionally.
Yep.
God, I hope
maybe unintentionally more than
Maybe unintentionally.
I would do it unintentionally. So, even if you don't get the book, there's actually an interesting recipe that comes in this article from Nerdist called hand pies, and it looks pretty good.
Looks like a pasty.
Okay, it looks like a pasty. If you haven't had a pasty, I just recently started eating those because of that place in Frankenmuth.
If you haven't had a pasty, you're not from Michigan.
Well, then I wasn't from Michigan for 30 years.
Apparently,
But anyways,
I'm still not a part of it.
So anyways, this makes like a small little, it almost looks like an apple pie, except there's meat and veggies and stuff inside of it. But it gives you all the recipe and all the details what you need to make the dough and everything. And I just thought this was really, really cool, so I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess pasties are more of a UP thing anyway.
Maybe you thing.
Yep.
Cause I had never had them until just that place opened in Frankenmuth. So I thought this was cool. Would you any of you guys consider trying some of this stuff if I was to pick this bad boy up.
I mean, depends on which recipe you pick, but yeah.
I noticed
I wonder what
Austin's
kind of
awfully
like
quiet.
desserts would be in there. That's what I'm more
That's what I
interested in.
want.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Could be weird looking, but I mean, like, I don't know, man.
Do you guys have much faith in Justin's cooking skills? Is that
We
that
have
what
faith
the question
in
is,
Justin's.
or-
We have faith in Justin's wife's cooking skills.
She let's get something straight. My wife bakes amazingly, but I do most of the cooking in the house. So and some things turn out, and some things not so much. But you know,
Yeah, that
that's
always
life.
The thing was,
happens.
with pasties, they're that middle ground. You know, they're sort of like baking, but with meat in the middle. It's
There you
a-
go,
it's a-
there you
it's a
go.
fine art.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, I think that'll do it for our Let's Talk About Blank segment.
But of course, after the Let's Talk About Blank segment, we always have something to give away.
Here
We
go.
do.
I think so.
We do give away Fat Loots. Do you want to tell our audience about it?
Yeah, so we have a gift to give away. It's by Loresmith. It is the modular dungeon tiles, specifically the Arcania set. Now, the Arcania digital tile set lets you make dark, shadowy dungeon maps rich with the fumes of arcane secrets. Now, on one hand, you might not find a cookbook, and you might find the grimoire that had Cthulhu on the front of it. That's not a cookbook. That's a Doom. Don't go there.
That's a Doom book.
That's a Doom book. Now, on the other side, you might find the cookbook. Hey, now everyone gets to have nice food for a little bit.
I like that.
If you have it. I don't know if you have it.
Those arcane fumes are just the
Yes.
bland wizard soup he was talking about.
Oh, that's a good
Matt, who's our winner today, boss?
Our winner is Lee G. 1993.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo! You're the man, Lee. Yeah.
Nice.
If you didn't win, have no fear, because Crit Academy is here. Head on over to critacademy.com/loresmith and get some really cool Fat Loots, digital
Yeah.
terrain, some other good stuff. So, all right, moving on to our main topic, dungeon design. Thank you, Matt, once again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Mhm.
I talked a little bit about what you do, but for those that want to know a little more, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in the world of role-playing games?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Whitby. I kind of got my start dipping my toes into the Dmsguild and sort of publishing content on there. And then it's been about a year and a half later, and that led me to starting the Dmsguild House podcast.
Okay.
And that's just basically, I'll be honest, I started that podcast as just a chance to chat to cool people. That I just happened to record it. And, then I'm coming up to like my 52nd episode. Again, not quite just under 200 episodes like you guys. But the first year, it feels like a big milestone.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And again, congratulations to you guys when you hit that 200. Have you guys got something planned for the 200 milestone?
I would love to say
Do we?
I was going to say, I would love to say I've got this master plan, but no, not at all.
No, yeah. Doesn't surprise us.
We did something for 50 and 100, though.
Yep. Let's see if we can get Matt Mercer for 200 now.
Matt, are you listening? Hey, if you guys know who Matt Mercer is, tweet him right now. Go on Twitter and say you need to come on their episode for episode 200. Please, and tag us.
That'd be really
He can't be
funny.
that busy. No, he's
Yeah,
probably
no,
like
I'm
a-
sure he's got all the time in the
schedule.
world.
But no,
Surely.
and yeah, literally. So I started with the DMs Guild, and mostly I've kind of been writing adventure and adventure adjacent content. And with that, I have written. I've written. I see. I'm better at
editors, it's
writing
okay.
words, less than speaking them. I have written a fair few dungeons, which I feel like has given me a decent leg to stand on to chat about it with you guys today.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you mentioned your podcast that is on iTunes and a bunch of other podcatcher platforms. Once again, the blog for this episode at critacademy.com/post/episode 193 has a link directly to your DMs Guild stuff, your YouTube channel, as well as his iTunes channel and his show. So definitely check them out.
Yeah, no, please do. Yeah, I think So I've recently released an adventure called Tyke's Torment, which is set in Waterdeep and all about the sort of origins of Timora and Bashaba, the gods of luck and misfortune.
That's
And
awesome.
then, just around the corner, I've got a new product, which is it's using the the Taroka deck from Curse of Strahd
Yes.
Ooh,
to randomly generate adventures.
that is
Wow.
really awesome.
Yeah, I think we've worked it out that there's 64,000 different adventure combinations.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus.
yeah.
It's time to
Holy
write
crap.
down a
Yeah.
table. Just like,
Yeah,
we're gonna-
it's like I said, it's fun just to be able to say that there's that many options.
Mhm.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm still churning stuff out there. So yeah, no,
Wonderful.
again,
I'm really glad.
Awesome, yeah.
Make sure to give them a follow. You can follow them. They can follow you on Twitter, right? Is the one you're most active on? That's what is
Yeah.
the Twitter handle at?
at Whitby writes because
All right.
my surname's Whitby and I occasionally write things.
I used to
That
write
works.
stuff.
Yeah.
I miss those days.
Anyway,
Yeah.
anyway.
Moving on. So, dungeon design. Now, first, I want to say dungeons are, in my opinion, were one of my favorite parts starting out. I love the dungeon crawling aspect. I know that's a big part of what you love, the combat stuff. And when I got into 4th edition, that was one of my favorite parts. So when I ran a crappy dungeon, I knew. Like there was like that was not fun. It was the same encounter like 5 times. It's just here's a monster, here's 5 minions, and that's not exciting. So today what we're hoping to break down is what are the things you need to take into consider when designing a dungeon. And when we say dungeon, we don't mean like a prison cell. We mean not just an underground tunnel. It can be an outside, like in the forest. It can be in the mountain and in a valley. Dungeon is just a term that describes the aspect of raiding a thing, I guess.
Ooh, could be a giant floating Rubik's Cube in the sky that constantly changes the layout.
You said a giant
That's really
Rubik's
good.
Cube in the sky?
It's a
Yeah.
moving labyrinth.
That'd be kind of cool.
That was in what was that the Clash of the Titans movie, right? Didn't one of those movies have them go through a giant square that just rotated? Was the labyrinth? Anyways.
There's also the film, is it The Cube, which
Oh.
is like a Saw-esque film, which is essentially like people in like a Rubik's Cube where they move in with the rooms. Yeah, you can really mess with your players with the layout of rooms. It's a fun one.
As
Yeah.
a player, that sounds a little miserable. I'm like, oh man, I gotta go in there, and then I look behind me. I'm like, well, that room wasn't there.
Where did that come from? So how do we start these dungeons off? Most of our guide is going to start from the outlines of what come in the Dungeon Master's guide, because honestly, who knows better than the people that are responsible for designing the game? So we're going to use those talking points or we're going to use those that as a kind of a talking point through this discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to add to it. So first thing we want to talk about is dungeon theme. When you're deciding what you want to run and why you want to run it, you need to know what the overall theme you're looking for. Are you looking for a temple of fire? Are you looking for a floating castle? Something that takes place in the astral sea? That really, in my opinion, and obviously WotC agrees too because they wrote it, is the first step in dungeon design. What do you want to build? Matt, how would you like to expand on this?
So it is a tough one because so basically I think 9 times out of 10 when you're coming to design a dungeon, like again within like your own campaigns of that, it's either if you're coming at it from you just want an exciting vista or again something to sort of like keep the players busy, then going sort of I think that arguably you go the WotC way, which is the dungeon theme way. I think what was it their 4th point, which is about talking about dungeon purpose, I think is also one of the best places to start. I don't want to start arguing with the
No, yeah,
case.
for sure.
Sure, go ahead.
But-
They're not perfect.
but-
They made 4th edition that everyone hated, so
I
Because
loved it.
I think
I love it.
I was
Because-
gonna say those two liked it though, so that's a little bit of a
yeah.
faded argument.
Because I guess like one of the things is like, okay, it's dungeon purpose. It's almost 2-pronged because one, it's like, okay, what is the purpose of the dungeon within this world? Is it to keep a creature safe? Is it to keep like a forbidden artifact? Is it someone's house? But
Could be.
it's better to also think about it like, what is the purpose of the dungeon for your campaign necessarily? It's not. It's less of like in a more meta sense of like, why do you want a dungeon? Or what sort of experience are you trying to want? Which kind of leans into like the idea of a theme of like, what sort of experience are you going for? I always think that some of the fun stuff you can always do is thinking about what some of the most exciting locations are. For example, taking a series of sunken ships that are connected underwater could make something of a dungeon underwater.
That'd be really fun, actually.
And just by the nature of that being a slightly exciting location, like they're talking about like a floating castle or being like a temple of fire. These sort of things of like immediately they kind of stand out.
Right.
So if we stick with like the underwater connecting of like shipwreck stuff, you think, okay, well clearly this is why are all the ships underwater and why are they connected? You have kind of two angles. One, you can go with like smugglers, and maybe it's the idea that this is a Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign. And the players have been running into trouble at sea with constantly getting raided, and they're just like, where are these people coming from? It turns out the smugglers, they have this weird network of sunken ships that somehow has air bubbles. Again, you hand wave some stuff.
So just like, oh, it makes sense, and your players look at you and they're like, no, yeah, you're right.
What is it? There's that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean with the boat.
Yep.
They just do that with like a really big ship.
Yeah.
Keeps all the air in. But and then that kind of links into like my earlier point of like what the purpose of the dungeon was, because it was the idea of like that you have in your campaign you've set up this threat of this smugglers, and rather than just have them sat in like a dusty old tower that's on the edge of a hill somewhere, you've got this is something exciting, hopefully. Yeah.
Well, and it's really cool because so we talked briefly about themes and now locations. I truly believe that locations are a core aspect of deciding the types of flavor details that go into the stuff that are part of the dungeon. So we'll jump off of your underwater boat thing here. Shut up. So you're in for that. If we're gonna have hazards and traps, they need to fit that theme. So what can I do in an underwater battle that I can't do on the surface? And the first thing that starts thinking to me, we all have fought octopuses, right? You know, maybe Krakens, things like that. So that's the first thing that comes to mind to me. So how can I fit this in? How can I make a trap similar to that? Maybe the trap is just they stumble into an octopus and it squirts ink and flies away, or swims away. Octopus don't fly. Monster variant, they do now.
That'd be a great time.
But little traps like that make sense in the scene. So you've got the bad guys that say, well, instead of making complex traps, let's trap a little tiny octopus in this area. So when somebody steps on it, it squirts out its ink and it blinds them and alerts us in some way. Same thing with like steam vents underwater, creating bubbles that rise all the way to the surface.
Or you could also have, what is it, like buckets or like boxes of like chum that have been kind of contained, and at the moment the players they get dropped with all this blood meat, and then like sharks pop out of not out of the walls, but out of the
for sure, definitely
vicinity.
out of the walls. We have like shadow sharks that are like wall clingers, and then they just like come out of the wall as like a shadow. And go...
We do now.
But if we again to stick with the underwater smugglers, then in the context of like a bunch of people who want to keep their ill-gotten goods safe. It makes sense for there to be traps towards the entrance, or to have fake entrances.
Yes.
I think that's something that I think they touch upon within the Dmsguild.
They could totally like use like an anchor as like a door. Like so that way when they bring it back, so like they've hidden the thing, right? Because like when you said with the whole like the fake entrances, the entrance is just you have to raise this anchor and then you go in, and then the anchor closes back down.
We now have it. We got our boss of our dungeon, right? It's a half man, half shark with an anchor weapon.
Wereshark.
A wereshark. Yes, we're doing it. See, and this is why I like this format, because as you think about it and you start to brainstorm ideas, things just be able to fall into place based on those ideas. We've only talked about theme and location at the moment, and we already are starting to envision the type of setting and the thematic effects that go into it, whether it's hazards. I like hazards a lot. So in a water setting, if you're at the ground, maybe just walking kicks up soot, so you're almost indefinitely blinded if you're down by battling down by the ocean's floor. Right. Which, if you check out our Dark Tides of Damadan, which takes place underground or underwater, there's a lot of that stuff. So check it out.
Yeah, limited visibility sucks. Who would have guessed?
Or being a non-aquatic creature in an aquatic dungeon in general.
That sucks too.
So moving on to the next one. So we talked about theme, we talked about location, and how that affects the story of the building of the dungeon and the traps and stuff that you've got. I think it also makes sense that it would and I think we kind of touched on this already, is, why does the dungeon exist? Who made it? Who created it? And, creators often have vast differences in design approaches. The design of dwarves is going to be significantly different than, and more massive and grandiose to offset their short stature. I'm sure that's why they do that. But something built by elves is going to be, more nature, something sung out of a tree, or like in World of Warcraft, the whole place is a giant top of a giant tree. Or in this case, you have the creators of this, with these underwater people. Maybe they just robbed those people, then sunk their ships and created their own little fortress now, chain fortress, because that happens to be where they do their.
They've done the act so many times that they've just created a hideout underwater.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
Makes
I'm
sense.
thinking.
Yeah.
I like it.
And I was gonna say, so to kind of like add on to your your point, Justin, is that I think sometimes I think thinking about like who created the dungeon, like if it is like, if for example, if it is a group of kobolds, and I think a trap that sometimes you can run into is putting in a trap you can run into is putting traps in for the sake of putting traps in.
Yes.
And
That's a trap.
Sometimes again, to take the kobold example, it kind of makes sense that kobolds, being the wacky inventors that they are, that they would probably trap every hallway in existence. And there may be one or two, crushed kobolds that you run across who had forgotten, where the traps were placed. But take the dwarf example, they are probably only going to be putting traps in, I imagine, either a mausoleum or a sort of archive of something.
Somewhere where all their works are hidden.
Yeah, probably away from the kitchen. So the door to the kitchen isn't going to be trapped in some way.
Right.
Or their workshops might have all traps that aren't necessarily traps, just a mechanism they work with. Where those who don't know how to interact with them
might think it's a trap.
That makes
But
sense.
I think also it kind of gives away to an interesting player character, like an artificer who is a dungeon designer or creator of some kind.
Oh, I love that.
It's a good one.
That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think as well, because I think one of the typical examples they kind of use within the Dmsguild of who creates dungeons and stuff like that is up high on the list is typically liches, and I think they're of the type that they get you to design their dungeon and then they bury you in it in some way or another.
Probably.
And that, again, it's interesting to think about if you think about the logistics of who created the dungeon. For example, if it's like a dwarven fort, I imagine there's a good sense of community and everyone sort of, pulling their part to make this the best pristine thing. If it's done by a lich, you imagine that there may be one or two people who aren't so happy the fact that they're making this dungeon.
Probably not,
and then you can think about, maybe they put in, secret alcoves. Maybe they have little tunnels. And that kind of gives you, again, so you have the idea of who designed it, but then who physically built the dungeon.
Yeah,
magic.
I think I think that really rolls in really well to what the purpose of the dungeon is. You touched on it briefly earlier that dungeons exist for a reason. A lich, maybe you design this intricate or force people to design this thing for him that's solely there to protect his phylactery, right? That makes sense. An ancient dwarven fortress might just be that. It was designed by a dwarven fortress, and since then it's been a millennia, and other creatures have moved in and out and called it home or whatever. So all these other things have been added to it, but it's always going to have that base dwarvish theme. But you can utilize that as a way to introduce flavor, lore, and other aesthetics to the story. So, for instance, I think I wrote here is, a temple built to worship a Dragonborn god will probably be chock full of lore and history of Dragonborn, all written in Draconic, and is likely to have, I would imagine, lots of traps to keep people out because they don't want people going into their most holy of holy places and messing with their shit. At least in my mind.
Make sure it makes sense, yeah.
But, a collection of caverns and tunnels built by kobolds to a dragon they worship is likely to be stockpiled with, traps, as you mentioned, to keep everyone out from getting to their dragon lord's hoard, you know what I mean? And you have players that really love that sort of stuff. They want to know more about the world. And even if you don't have players that are so ingrained in learning about that, taking them through a thematically built dungeon with theme, knowing who built it and the purpose of the dungeon can really give you little tidbits to feed to them to help them understand what was here and how it came to be without having to bog them down with pages and pages of notes, I think.
And I guess almost as a like a slight counterpoint is sometimes, like, for the sake of it, you could have a wizard who has created a dungeon demi-plane as a method of testing adventurers. And the fact that like the purpose could be that there is no purpose necessarily. It is essentially like a wacky funhouse of
like a
series
testing
of challenges.
ground.
Yeah.
That's still a purpose, though, isn't it?
But it's a dungeon for the sake of being a dungeon, which is inherently doesn't have any purpose because it's there to be there.
The dungeon's shaped like a Mobius strip.
A what?
It's
A Mobius strip?
like is it like that sort of shape that kind of folds in on itself? And
Oh, infinite loop sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
But,
I was like, what are you
but
talking
admittedly, again, the sort of the wizard creating a demi-plane dungeon for the sake of like a fun house is its own sort of like niche, and obviously it depends if the party is like, you know, if just it's great for a one shot.
What is it? What is that one spell that allows you to just like kind of like create a fortress? What is that spell? It's not Sanctuary.
You're not talking about Magnificent Mansion. That's something.
No.
I'm thinking there's also Maze that teleports people into a maze.
No, I'm not thinking that'd be a cool dungeon idea though. Like you just sent someone to a maze, but like that spell didn't work properly, and sorry, you're not coming back.
I think that's the imprisonment spell, because like it has like 7 different modes and one of them's like an infinite mage.
But
now that you mention it,
there is. There is like a spell in D&D 5e, but I don't remember what it's called offhand. But you can continuously cast it over and over again, and then I believe after like the 14th day or something like that, it stays, and that's the dungeon.
Well, our master search Googler with his Google Foo is going to look that up because that sounds awesome, and
But I remember being a higher level spell.
I feel like it has been done before, just not in 5th edition necessarily.
So
I don't remember. At least I think maybe it wasn't 5th edition, which would be weird because I only have started playing in 5th edition, so it'd be really weird for me to know like a
edition,
4th edition spell or something weird.
I'm like demi-planes.
So we talked a little bit about the purpose and
Maze.
the benefits of it. We got a point here that talks about dungeon history. By adding a short history of the dungeon can help flesh out its contents. I think that's, kind of what we talked about briefly. What I think really comes into play is adding questions of why is there nobody here? Why was it abandoned? What that in of itself creates an interesting story because, for instance, let's go to the dwarven fortress we talked about earlier. Why was that abandoned? Were they just completely massacred? Did just one day they disappeared like the Mayans did? Interesting things like that can lead into potentially other story arcs and campaign hooks because you might have a single line that says, oh, just one day during a high moon, all of the dwarves disappeared. Well, the players might latch onto that. Like, we want to go into a dungeon where an entire civilization just disappeared. And you guys want to go there?
I'd be like, yeah, I want to figure out what made that civilization disappear so I can kick that thing's ass.
Because I want to disappear. I want to just vanish. Like,
get out of here. But like because I'm playing any luck, by the way, Ian? Probably not.
Close I got so far is imprisonment,
which
Maybe
is what
it might have
Matt
been.
was talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe it might have been imprisonment.
All right.
But what I was saying is like, now admittedly, I'm playing Zorax right now on our little game right now, and he's always like I want to fight the strongest guy. Like, you're fine, you weird bone devil guy, but like, I know there's a person who's way over there on a flying fortress that I'd most certainly want to fight right now, and you're kind of in the way.
So I think what's kind of interesting about like when it comes to like if you're designing your own dungeon for a campaign and you're writing out the history, I think one of the important things to balance is it's easy to kind of get carried away with writing, I don't know, like 300 pages of rich lore.
Right.
Of like, was it? First was like Ulfgar Ironaxe, first of his name, who founded the... and I think a good tooltip, which is also comes into that when you're sort of like writing adventures, is that only worry about the history that the players can actually find out.
Yes.
So, for example, if we do take the sort of like the Dwarven King that sort of like vanished overnight, if for example within the I guess dwarves have kings, maybe they like or like we'll just say that it's the king because we're
Right.
cliche.
Yeah.
If within like the king's chambers there is a infernal lockbox that has a contract in it that outlines that if you do not pay this many souls by this day, we're gonna everyone out. Then it's important to kind of have the kind of the history of like, okay, well, why did this dwarf king sign this contract?
Right.
Yeah.
Mighty Fortress spells, Samson's Guide, 8th level.
Fortress, that's the one.
Mighty Fortress.
Yep.
But which again, it kind of like it adds to was it Austin's point, the fact that like these spells exist.
Yep.
Again, you're not bending or breaking any rules by sort of saying that a wizard just poofs out a whole dungeon.
Yeah,
It probably is a lot easier than like going through the logistics of building a dungeon in this day and age.
Yeah, I agree. And what's and there's and people have done that before. That theme can be done really well. I'm a big anime fan, and one of my favorite shows is Maggie. Or Magi, or however you want to call it, and just one day, all these giant dungeon towers just appeared around the world. And when you conquer the dungeon, you get access to a Djinn.
A genie.
Are they not Djinn?
Jin.
Yeah, but it starts with a D, right?
The D's silent, I'm pretty sure.
What the hell ever, you guys? I don't care.
Well, you said the D and the J at the same time, though. Jin.
Djinn. That's what. You know what? It doesn't matter. It really does not. I don't care. Anyways.
Grant you wishes.
Yeah, right. It grants you all the king. It grants you a wish and all the valuables in the world, and then it poof disappears once you conquer it, and it just leaves this massive hole where it used to be. So the idea of something like that still makes for an amazing story, even if it just appears out of nowhere.
I must admit that I kind of get caught up in like the meta sense of like if you lived in a world where these dungeons appeared, like they were all over the world, and if conquered, like you get like a big reward, you would like have like this sort of competing arms race of adventuring groups.
For sure,
you would.
And I that's one again. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit. Actually, no, I'm kind of not. I can bring this back around to dungeons before I get carried away. I love rival adventuring parties.
Yes.
I think they could be introduced in more adventures. And what better place than a dungeon? Like
for sure.
What if you're in a dungeon and there is already an adventuring party coming in the other side from another end, like that completely shifts the dynamic, because now it's like a race against time to try and get to the center before anyone else does.
Right.
Oh, the adventurers open up the treasure vault to the dungeon. Finally, we got this far. There's a note in there. We got here first, suckers. Signed, the Treasure Hawks.
With like a little drawing of them.
Oh, that's so funny.
Dang you, Treasure Hawks!
But see, I think that makes for an amazing opportunity. So I hate to bring it back to anime again, but in the prequel, no, I don't actually. I have no regrets.
Oh no, yeah.
In the prequel of Maggie, where you follow Sinbad, he runs into that exact scenario where the situation is so challenging, it takes the competing people working together to achieve a goal that only one person can claim.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there becomes this character development about who should win and who should become the capturer, the king, who should be the king candidate. And they all end up developing these kind of interpersonal relationships based on that, and at the end they decide who's going to do it. So I do think that you're onto something, and that would be just really, really cool. But I think we could even make it better. What if you have the same players running multiple groups into the same dungeon, racing against themselves?
What if they didn't realize that they were like racing in the same dungeon?
All right, we're derailing now too much.
Yeah.
I do that. I'm sorry.
No,
I've been trying to keep my stuff a little more
it's
straightforward, but
like I was gonna say like
the tangents are fun.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Yes.
Like my favorite dungeon that I've ever had the pleasure of actually playing was like it's in Lufia 2, which is a much older game and did get a remaster later on the DS. And it's literally just like a floating castle, and like a lot of the game's mechanics was there was these spires that were like floating outside of the castle, and you had to get to those somehow so you can deactivate them to unlock something that was way deep underwater directly under it.
Catapult.
And it was awesome. And it was just such a good time because I was just like, holy crap, this is so cool. And then you had to like, there's like this giant like power core crystal in there too, and you had to run around that, and it was man, it was
That
so
does
good.
sound cool.
Ooh, Zachary from Facebook's like, he's probably will be fighting a group of were-rats that took residence inside a ancient dwarven gold mine that belonged to the Dwarf PC's clan.
Oh, that is cool.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah.
Which brings, that's a good segue right into the next part, talking about the inhabitants of the dungeon.
Yeah.
What kinds of creatures inhabit the dungeon? Once again, coming back to that theme, you're probably not going to have sharks or octopuses in a desert
fire
scene,
temple.
right? Or a fire temple, right? Though
Fire
monster
octopuses.
variants are a thing, so maybe there are some. Who knows?
It's a fire shark.
But
that sounds miserable.
who moved in? Is it a small group? Is it an entire group? I mean, you might have just a small clan, private clan of orcs, or maybe you have an entire orc raiding party that hides in here. Maybe it's just full of monsters that just happen to wander in. I think we had an encounter recently where everyone was chasing and fighting all these crazy-looking abominations, and it turned out that what is it, a fulmore or the stupid monster that turns people into other monsters just happened to stumble into the area and get
that's
people.
in there right down.
Do you remember that? Yeah, no, I don't remember what it was. But anyways,
The slod. Is it the slod?
I mean, slots do that.
they
but
do
yeah.
do that, but I don't think it was the slot. It was one of the. It used to be a like a ugly elf, and the elves like banished him or some shit. It's a giant, I think. It starts with an F, like a Fulmore or a not Fulgore. That's Killer Instinct. But anyways, doesn't matter. So that was a good example of monsters being generated by mistake. The damn thing just wandered in there and got lost and got stuck, and would happen to run into travelers that were coming through the valley, and poof, would change them. And so now you have an entire collection of monsters in this abandoned tunnels, all because one got lost.
Makes sense.
And that also means that the larger the dungeon, the more variety you're going to have too, because they might just take residence in a really small area. So that gives you an opportunity to expand on the factions where I think this actually happens in the, what is the book that came out that's all the bunch of different old adventures? The Sunless Citadel is in it.
Is it the? It's the Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Yes, that's the one. In it, you've got two warring, I think, goblin tribes in the Sunless Citadel because it's so big. And so there, you wander in there and you got to kind of take sides, but both sides are goblins. So what are you going to do? But so the inhabitants are important to a dungeon's development. If you're going to have a fire temple, it would be really weird not to have fire like giants or fire monsters, a salamander or something, because you want to reinforce that theme with the monsters that occupy it.
Yeah, you're not going to throw an ice knight in there. Sorry, buddy.
Unless maybe in the prison. I don't know.
Oh, I like
Or
that.
in the prison. Yeah,
And he's
that's
slowly
true.
evaporating. he's no longer an ice knight. He's more like an ice stick, and he's got a little tiny thing on his arm that used to be a shield, and it looks like it used to be big, but now it's a tiny buckler.
His name is Puddle Knight.
But I guess kind of what's kind of interesting about trying to balance the inhabitants, and I think the Dungeon Masters Guild, which I have off screen, that's why I keep tapping, just smacking my table. They touch on like the idea of including factions, and I highly recommend it because I think again with dungeons you can easily kind of fall into the trap of only supporting the exploration and combat pillars, and
Right.
not necessarily enough sort of like social or role playing.
No, for sure.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah, just by having like a faction that is just not friendly necessarily,
Right.
but just
But they're not going to outright kill you.
and
Wow.
it kind of feeds into like, was it the next point is like dungeon ecology?
Mhm.
That one of the things to always think about is once you have like multiple factions, then you do have to think about the logistics of like, okay, well, are these factions eating each other? If so, is there enough to kind of keep both groups alive?
Right.
You can definitely have like a lot of fun with inhabitants, and particularly to kind of talk about like trying to kind of inject those sort of social elements into a dungeon. One of my favorite ways to do it, which is kind of cheap, is that most inhabitants groups, they probably have a chef, and typically chefs, it's pretty alright to make them neutral or
Yeah.
friendly. the fact that they're so caught up in their cooking that they just want the players to get a particular ingredient, or they want the players to be test dummies for a new recipe.
Oh, I love that.
Maybe they're doing a pastry from the cookbook. They've got the it goes full circle.
I love it.
And it allows you to sort of have like a moment of role play and respite, because I mentioned again it can sometimes occasionally be combat after combat, which is nice to sort of have.
What if the cook was like the leader's brother? So now you got an in with the leader, and you're like, no, but we know the cook, and they're like, oh,
you know Jensen?
Hey guys, I think we gotta let him through. He's like, but he's gonna kill us. No, no, we let him through.
You know what that reminds me of? Do you guys ever watch the movies Under Siege with Kung Fu guy? What's his name? Steven Seagal.
Kung Fu guy, huh?
Well, whatever. Anyway, Steven Seagal is a chef on a Navy ship, and it
Awesome.
It becomes a heist. Some terrorists take it over, and they just happen to ignore the most dangerous man on the ship, who's the chef, who is just a retired military person, and it's really cool. You should check it out. But I totally love that theme and that driving that idea that you can have an NPC in there that's just kind of neutral to what's going on, and he's just there to do a job. In this case, feeding people. I think that's a great one. Another way when it comes to that sort of thing with inhabitants, and you mentioned the factions. People exploring dungeons happens all the time. Maybe just their team is dead and they are dying. Maybe they're pinned under a boulder or something. Even if it's their last dying breath and they hand the players a note of whatever the next potential hook could be, they could take it or not and do it. But you can easily tie that the inhabitants into it with not just being monsters, but tying the factions in by something like that, because adventuring is dangerous and not everyone gets to it, especially if the players have a background that ties into any particular faction. I know one of mine in my patron games that I do monthly is always talking about how he loves his faction, and I feel like a shithead right now because I can't remember the name of the Lord's Alliance. So for me, I can toss somebody in there. Hey, I'm part of the Lord's Alliance. His group failed a mission they were trying to do, and he's dying. And here's the thing that needs to get to this person. And players may be like, whatever, I don't care. Or the Lord's Alliance, I have to take on this job, you know?
Yeah, it's for the Lord. We have to.
I think that you kind of also get like a little bit of freedom as well with again, it's having a dungeon with multiple entrances, or better yet, a dungeon that merges biomes. So for example, take if we go with like the dwarven fortress sort of thing, the lower chambers probably take on a more cavernous form,
right?
And that allows you to sort of have a gateway, maybe like a connection to the Underdark. And then you get to use all those sort of fun like packs of sturges coming in,
Underdark
sort of
stuff. Yeah.
And especially as well, if you have the sort of like, again, if we go with like the dwarf fortress have been kind of taken over, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the sort of, there could be a balance where if it's a goblin, like goblins now live there, they're aware of these dangerous monsters that kind of live underneath their home. So occasionally there's some food sacrifices where you just throw the smallest goblin down, whatever monsters down there eats said goblin, and then the monsters don't come out and eat all the goblins. It's for the greater good.
That's very cool. I love that.
That's a good point.
You're gonna have to come on again because I'm just getting all kinds of amazing ideas, and I don't know that I could write them down quick enough. I might have to listen back to this episode and take more notes.
Another really... sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, by all means, please.
I was just going to say another really important thing that we kind of are always kind of missing a little bit every once in a while is that there's hazards of being in a dungeon. So, for instance, in the Dwarven one, there's probably gouts of fire every once in a while that come out of the walls because it's like, oh, whoops, they haven't been here in a while. It's overrun by goblins, and I'm sure they haven't fixed the damn thing.
Goblins aren't known for their forge maintenance.
Probably not.
So you mentioned briefly, kind of moving into the next one, which is dungeon ecology, and the monster within the ecosystem. All of that really, it makes sense to have these other aspects in a more traditional dungeon, but you can shrink it even more. When you're describing like the senses and stuff and the location to your players, if you're in an area that's moist and wet, it's probably going to have, collection of skittering insects or that are insects that skitter across, cockroaches or whatever. And so, something has to be doing something about that. So maybe there's some spiders that take over the place that are eating those. Now, you don't have to make these combat encounters. You can just describe, hey, the moisture draws up, the insects are skittering along the wall. There's a spider web in the corner. All those sorts of things kind of fit, and they give you a way to enhance the player's experience through your descriptions. When you're going into the fire temple, the heat is going to be a huge one. So the constant reminder of how hot and sweltering it is. The volcano is a good example of that. The smell of sulfur in the air. The dungeon ecology is really going to be a powerful tool when it comes to affecting those senses that are touch, smell, what is the rest? Hearing, taste. You can taste it on your tip of your tongue, all that stuff.
Which usually actually does kind of. Usually it's like the ecology that it's a part of, like the biome that you're a part of. Usually is what leads to a lot of the hazards inside of dungeons, which I know is already kind of a little ahead of that as well. But it's like. I'm sorry, but if you're in a volcano, one small step on a certain crack and it might fall, and next thing you know, you're in some lava. That's not good.
Yeah. Actually, that was a good segue right into that if you want to push more into that.
I was just like, so, I mean, it's just like hazards in a dungeon obviously are going to, you need them to kind of fit the theme, right? So, like, obviously, if you're in an air temple, it kind of needs to be
in the air.
It can't just be, yes, my air temple. It's in a forest. There's vines everywhere around it. No, that's not an air temple. That's an earth temple, buddy.
Oh, and the air temple is constructed in a way where it can only be accessed by flying creatures, or does it only to move inside the dungeon?
They did that in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yep,
I think
when you had to unlock the door with airbending. That was really cool.
Well, it was also built upside down from the bottom of a cliff edge.
That specific air temple, that one was cool.
Because it was everything was built upside down, and you could only get to it if you can fly. So,
I guess you could probably earth.
That creates a hazard, though, right? 'Cause that's where
you're specifically in that case, like. How are you supposed to get down unless you're like really bold with climbing equipment and you gotta hope that you have enough rope to get there, or maybe you're just climbing on the rock wall like a maniac.
What if a bridge gives out or something and you're thousands of feet in the air?
Yeah, like this is.
That's honestly my favorite theme with anything flying, floating, flying in the air.
Having something always the fear of falling, right? You're specifically like a floating castle. Like, I got to get across from this room to the next room. Unfortunately, the only way for that to happen, because this castle's in sections, is there's a giant drop and it's on this weird looking bridge that looks like it might be 112 years old. Not ideal.
I think again you bring up like a kind of like an awesome point, which kind of like again with each kind of point we're going through, it kind of does kind of like circle back and forth because if you're thinking about the people who kind of again, if this is a dungeon where everyone flies, the layout of the rooms is going to be vastly different to what standard us land dwellers know and understand.
Yeah, and who's going to need rails?
There's multiple floors, but no stairs.
and what's kind of interesting as well is it kind of like, especially if you're having to like draw it or create it out as your own. You kind of have to think about like what rooms make sense for it to exist. So I think one of the examples, like if this is a dungeon that also exists as a home, then chances are there's going to be a bed chamber, or not even necessarily a bed chamber, a barracks, or maybe just like a sleeping den, which may consist of like bones, depending on who you're dealing with.
Yes.
If is there a organized structure to living, or is it like sort of like clans or tribes? Do they have like a designated kitchen, or is it more like open sort of fire pit sort of thing? And then there's the go-to question of like if there are people living, depending on how far you want to go, there's probably going to need to be some sort of toilet situation going on.
There's always got to be a bathroom.
Logistically, again, it probably needs to be there somewhere. I don't
know if you've read it yet, but I got to give a huge shout out to Jeff Stevens again, because we played through his the
weird
What was the one with the fruit?
Going with the fruit. I just remember the party. one.
Anyways.
Crap.
Ha! That's funny you say that. In it, the wizard's solution to a toilet was a bag of devouring that was underneath the seat.
Yeah.
And so one of them was. A bunch of them were bag of holding. So one of the players turned it upside down and filled the entire tower with shit. And so
Not the most ideal thing.
that's not something that most people think about. And you make a great point. You don't think about necessarily the bed chambers, especially not the shitter. The one time we did is because it was an outhouse and it was a mimic. But it's
Yeah, well, you know.
in all those things, I kind of want to bring it back around to the hazards. Those things can become dangerous. The reason I wanted to go this way is because in that tower, one of the bathroom units was a bag of devouring instead of a bag of holding, which is a surprise for anybody who sits on that bastard. So,
It quickly turns into a miserable experience.
yeah. You could say a really crappy one, actually.
Down the drain.
Wow.
But that was good, too.
Wow.
So when designing the dungeons, taking the ecology, the inhabitants, all that should shape the types of dangers that exist there. We were talking about the air temple thing, not having stairs, not having handrails. If you can fly, you wouldn't worry about that stuff. So now fighting a monster that can knock you back becomes a whole hell of a lot more dangerous than just fighting on the side of a mountain.
I don't know, man. I've grappled my fair share of flying creatures in my day.
Yeah, you just did that recently in the Descent.
I've done it
adventure,
twice.
didn't you? Yeah, he jumped and just
Imagine-
grappled demons and right out of the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
So who takes the brunt of the falling damage there? Is it Split or is it whoever
think we
lands?
just say
Like, you
both.
wrestle for like who?
Mostly I just say they both take whatever the fall damage is, but
Which makes sense. So.
I could definitely
they're
see an
both taking
argument
the
for
impact,
like a contested strength check or a contested dex versus strength to see who gets on the
Just-
bottom, right? And
Yeah.
fight for top or bottom. So do you want to take our last
Yeah.
talking point here for the?
Like, obviously, as we've seen, there are lots of options for dungeons, be it like the treasure, the traps, the setting, the monsters inside, the plot hooks attached to them, and so forth. But it's important to keep mixing up the options. Like, mixing up the encounters in the dungeon to keep things, like, interesting, like, mix up the themes, the flavor, keep it exciting. No one dungeon should be the exact same.
Yeah, don't. Those
sure.
get boring really, really quick. I've done that. When I first started DMing, every room was square. There was nothing in it. And it was just whatever monsters I tossed in it. And
Yep.
being able to, even if you don't hit all these points that we've discussed today, even just picking a couple of them will make your dungeons significantly more interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, right? Every table. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have two really quick points.
Go ahead.
That I've made in my notes that I kind of wanted to make. Especially in coming to mixing up the challenge, verticality can be your friend. Again, in the sake of the idea of like it's tiring to face box rooms and stuff like that. Coming into rooms where there are deep pits or there are higher platforms, just by the nature of having enemies that you see your way up and you have to kind of deal with, it changes the dynamic of the fight.
Yeah.
The moment you have to like again, if there's someone below you and there's a chasm in the way, that's sort of fun.
Can
My
confirm
second point,
this.
and I don't want to turn it into a bit of a rant, but be careful with doors, because sometimes if it is like a more traditional dungeon crawl of like a series of doors, players kind of fall in a habit of like freezing at every door and being like, I want to check for traps. I want to see if the door's locked. I want to try and peer through the hole. And 9 times out of 10, it's like it's you can do some interesting stuff with doors that keep the flow going. One way to kind of ensure that things keep moving is the door doesn't always have to be closed. It can be slightly ajar, and that might save you about 2 to 3 minutes of playtime.
That's going to make them far more suspicious. Are you kidding?
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I even saw a webcam the other day where the door was a mimic.
We did do Deadly Dungeon Doors recently, and that was fun. But
That
yeah,
stuff
dude,
gets scary, man.
If you described a door that was ajar, I'd be like, all right, there's something wrong with this because that doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, it should, right? It should be common. I mean, most people leave doors open.
You come across a door that is slightly ajar, and it is a full glass window door. You can see through it. It's clear. But then you have the idea of like it's a door that is like clear one way, but then there's people still hiding behind it.
It's so funny you say that. I was reading an article, and I could have swore it was from Gary Gygax explaining a situation that made his dungeon door so hard for the players to get by because it wasn't locked, it wasn't anything like that, but it had a like no door handles or nothing, but it had a little. You knock on it, but you have to knock on it in a specific spot. He's like, that was pretty common. I just moved where they had to knock. And they knocked in the normal position, and it didn't open, so they couldn't figure out how to get past the door and had to find another way around. I mean, little things like that. I mean, I don't know. Doors, you're right. Be careful of doors, because it does consume a lot of time.
Again, I don't know what it is, but I think most DMs could easily have a run about doors. But thank you for indulging me on that.
Anytime. You're not downloading porn, are you?
No.
Where did you go? Oh, the SRD? Oh, I did figure out the name of the monster. It is the Fomorian, by the way.
Oh.
It has that power that changes other stuff into other, like, Fomorians or something.
It just makes everything ugly.
Yeah, it makes them hideous.
They're actually, they're from the Feywild.
Yeah.
That's where they originated from.
They're banished by the elves, from what I remember. But anyways, so I think that'll do it for our main topic today, you guys.
Woo! Yeah.
We got a lot of mileage out of this. Matt, you really brought your A game. Got to be honest. Super impressed.
Yeah.
So
I must admit, I'm upset that I was about to make the joke that I live in a dungeon. But this is one of the nicer, more furnished rooms in my 9x9 cube of rooms.
I live in a dungeon, but this is the nice room.
This is one of the nice ones. Yeah.
Well, it looks very
There
nice.
nice
I like
rooms
the art
and
behind you.
dungeons. Now hold on, we just went over this.
There are some nice dungeons. See, those are the ones that'll really throw people off because you can turn a palace into a dungeon.
Yeah.
Perfectly normal palace. The goal is to avoid the servants that are walking around and not alert anybody.
And where like the final boss room is like that throne room where it's just like rows of pillars and like the stained glass all on the sides is all light the beams like light.
When you said throne room, I immediately thought toilet. I don't know why.
Of course. I can't be
you
serious with
imagine,
this guy. He's just always thinking about poop.
Can you imagine like a really gaudy noble who's moved into a dungeon? And so this is the fact that like it's literally just someone's house now, and they've kept as many of the traps and everything preserved, and it's almost like a museum of what was this dungeon once was.
It's pissed when people trigger the traps. Like, do you know how much dusting and cleaning I had to do to make sure that was just pristine? And then you walk over here and trip over it.
Yeah. That's not even one of the hard ones. That's the easy one.
One I thought about earlier when we mentioned like the let you build a dungeon. Mm-hmm. The final room is like the treasure room, but the only thing in it is a small pedestal, and on it is the phylactery, which is actually fake. But the room is guarded by 4 iron golems, and the phylactery is actually inside one of them hidden.
Nice,
but it's fake.
The real one's inside the golem.
Oh, okay. So, but there's a fake one that they can see.
Yeah.
Gonna swipe that.
Just every other room, there's a fake phylactery of like hoping that people would see it, smash it, be like, "Well, we're done. Let's go home."
Yeah, I don't want to be here any longer than I have to be.
Could you imagine how pissed off players would be if they grabbed the wrong one?
Especially when you get all the way to the end.
Well, you get to the end. There it is. We smash it. We go on our way, and then the damn guy is still attacking people and killing them. Like, we did that already. Start all over.
Or the phylactery is actually hidden inside the toilet in the bathroom. No one would look there.
Who was gonna reach in there?
Exactly.
No one reaching
He left a floater. All right. I think that'll do it for our main topic today. Before we move on, we are going to take a minute. This episode has been brought to you by our generous sponsor, Cobalt Press. It says it used to be a dragon of the outer darkness.
What does that even mean? Used to be. What is it now? Does anyone else speak Draconic?
It says you are not sufficiently respectful to its dragon's nature. It says, run?
Run? In this armor?
Excellent. The ground begins to rumble and quake beneath your feet. The Tome of Beasts 2 from Cobalt Press brings nearly 400 new monsters to 5th edition, designed by some of the most talented and wildly creative designers working today.
You'll find monsters for almost every location your heroes might journey, from farmlands to forests, dungeons to deserts, and from bustling cities to fantastical planar realms.
Tome of Beasts 2 brings you a wide range of new monsters from the angelic enforcers, swordbreaker skeletons, magma octopuses, walled horrors, and so much more.
Keep your players surprised, entertained, and terrified with the all-new opponents they've never seen before and won't be expecting.
Not bad for a cold read.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
we
really
got
good.
it on the first shot, I think.
First shot, yeah. That doesn't happen.
Thank you so much for your sponsorship, Cobalt Press. You guys are awesome. If you haven't picked up Tome of Beasts, it is now available. You can find a link in the show notes or right on our website at gritacademy.com. All right, now that we're done with that.
But now, it's the secret sauce of the show.
I'm sorry, what?
It's the secret sauce of the show.
And now,
it's back.
what you've all been waiting for.
When did you get it back?
Our Unearthed Tips and Tricks segment, where we bring you new and reusable material for both players and DMs.
I've always had it. I just stopped playing audio because I was getting, it was messing stuff up and it wouldn't go right, and I was having the editor add it all in later. But anyways.
Cool. Now it works.
Our character concept today comes from you, Matt Whitby. Would you like to tell us all about this awesome, misguided cleric?
That sounds fantastic
Yes.
already.
So a little preface. Actually, this is a character that I've played before.
Awesome.
And I love them. The premise is that you are a cleric who follows an evil aligned god with the best of intentions. It's the idea that you believe that deep in your heart that this god is misunderstood. All the sort of all the holy writings have just been mistranslated, and for whatever reason, this evil aligned god sees you as maybe like a good PR move, and is happy to sort of bestow upon some of their evil
It's
power
just like-
for you to go about and spread the good word.
It's like, oh no, wait, you are totally right. Hold on, let me just. Here's some little gifts for you. You're doing great, sweetie. Keep going.
Because chances are, it doesn't hurt them in any way. And
No, for sure,
may,
yeah.
It may get them a follower or two.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of the things is like the fun thing that I had was my cleric was a follower of Asmodeus.
Of course.
And every time I would sort of cast Healing Word, or just any sort of healing spell, I would explain how they would feel this sort of like sulfurous, like it burns, like it kind of like seals their wound in like a sulfurous way. They feel better, but their soul feels scarred.
I love it.
And there's my cleric going, isn't Asmodeus great? Isn't like he really came through with us in there. And,
He's bad.
and,
The scripture is just misinterpreted. I love that.
yeah, it's never as bad as you think.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and yeah, you kind of and as a sort of misguided cleric, you do your part to kind of spread the teachings.
Mhm.
You spend a good part being kind of chased out of villages if most people know what Asmodeus or is aware of him. You may use like a pseudonym to say like the Lord of the Nine.
Nice.
Even then, that sounds a little bit evil. Just the Lord. We'll just call him the Lord.
I can just see it right now. Yes, miss. Do you have a moment to talk about the Lord of the Nine?
They're like the Lord. Oh, the Lord. Yes. Wait. What was that last part? I started talking before you finished.
No,
I
don't
didn't
worry
hear that
about it.
right.
It's fine.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the Lord of the Nine.
Just cough when you say it. The Lord of the Nine.
Yeah, and yeah.
Don't you know about
I
the
think
9 planar gods up above? The 9 stones like Asmodeus. God, whew, real bad cough. Sorry.
My god happens to be the 9th one, so we call him the Lord of the Nine.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, and obviously it kind of lends itself to like a more sort of like comic relief-esque character.
Mhm.
But it does kind of it has the opportunity to be that sort of weird line where as the party kind of come to grips with you being a good aligned follower of an evil god.
Good alive.
Yeah,
yeah.
as good as you can be.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of like again when constantly sort of confronted with the idea that you're following an evil god. It's an evil god, and how you as a cleric kind of deal with that.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun to have with it.
Yeah.
Oh, Bane? Evil? No. He's just ruthlessly efficient. But he told you to launch the soldiers' families from capitals into the fortress. Yes, when we lose a dozen people in the process, but we save hundreds of lives, we won't die in battle.
All right.
I could
Very
imagine.
efficient loss.
I imagine like trying to like what is it? Clerics get to do that, right? Where they get to like call help from their god. It'd be real weird when it's just like Asmodeus just rips through like into the mortal planes like, hello, yes, I know you needed my help, and you're just looking like, oh, that's what you look like.
Yeah. You look very pointy. Very. What's with the?
Why is O Fortuna playing in the background?
Why are you like glitching in and out of existence? I knew you were a god, but you seem a little extra powerful for a
A
god.
little sketchy. It's really funny because you could use the summon the god for him to do a whether it's passing on knowledge, but if in Naruto when he summons the giant toad to help him, the guy is just annoyed and irritated as all hell that he was just summoned by somebody who's not worth his time. Very much like Shenron in Dragon Ball Z too. He's like,
Especially abridged.
now what?
Or maybe like depending on like how evil or malicious the god is, they could like lean into it. They could like appear disguised. Like they come as like appearing as like as godly and holy as they possibly could.
That would be totally an Asmodeus move, by the way.
And,
He just come in, he's like, oh, but I'm adorned in jewelry, and I have this magnificent ruby scepter.
In the Stormlight Archive series, Odium, this totally not good guy, bad deity, is coated in glowing white and golden armor. And it just looks everything that would be the most holy of. He's like, you must understand, the world must be purified of the darkness and the imbalance. That is why I'm here, and I need your assistance to bring about new greatness for the world. And you're just like, that sounds really good till you find out he wants to wipe it all out to make it pure.
I love the idea of like a really sort of like good-looking person trying to politely convince a cleric to gouge someone's eyes out. as like it is I assure you it is the best course of action. It's like, well, okay, I guess I'll gouge this guy's eyes out.
His god blinds him, so therefore we must blind him. And you're just like, I'm not gonna argue with you because I kind of follow you, but I mean that's a little weird, isn't it? And he's like, "Are you doubting me?" He's like, "Nope." Just pull out the knife real quick.
All right, I think that'll do it for our character concept. The misguided cleric.
It makes me really want to play a cleric.
Yeah,
Alex, that's really fun, actually.
Oh, we did not follow the script at all.
No.
I was thinking about down the line when I edited it for YouTube.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Good luck for that, man. So our monster variant today is the young purple worm. So in order to get this, because I love the purple worm, but let's be honest, it's big and bad, and you have to be a higher level to even deal with it. So instead, what we got you is the small one. So you're gonna start with the origin stat block of the Grick Alpha. You're going to remove the stone camouflage, dark vision, climb, beak, and tentacles, and you're going to give it some new features. You're going to give it tremor sense, blind sight, and tunneler so that it can burrow through solid stone, leaving a 5-foot diameter tunnel in its wake. You're going to give it a new bite feature that allows it to swallow a medium or smaller creature. I'm not going to bother describing all the damages. It's got a con save when you attack it from the inside to regurgitate it, pretty much the same feature that the purple worm has. But this is where it gets interesting. It has it has a tail stinger that can really mess you guys up with a constitution save, doing 66 poison damage. And then it has we're going to give it a reaction called Imposing Figure. When it's hit with a melee weapon attack, it can use its reaction to release an intimidating bellow at the attacker. And if the target can see or hear it, must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened. Kind of a defensive bellowy thing,
Right.
Coming from this. This is a little more reserved than some of the other crazy crap that I build.
Sure, yeah, this is not anything extreme.
But that's okay because you're going to figure out why as soon as we get to the encounter concept because I tied them together. But so overall, what do you guys think about kind of fighting it's still a big giant worm. I mean, the thing is still a large classification. I really wanted to bring that flavor to a lower level class that I could introduce the characters to, much like the dragons. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I love it. I think the idea of the moment you start bringing in like youngs or children,
Yeah.
Yep.
it kind of brings the element of like you fight this monster and you're like, phew, that was good. And then Mama comes along,
Yeah,
and then
Mama's
it
here.
completely changes the dynamic of the fight to be like, oh, we won this, but now we need to like peg it because it was tiny in comparison to the true
Yeah.
threat.
And you really only see like creatures at various points of life, if you will, with dragons, really. So it's kind of nice to visit that with other creatures too, like
for
especially
sure.
when you like giant size or monster size creatures too.
Yeah.
So
It was very much inspired by graboids too, by the way, because I love the idea of this thing just popping up during a battle. Because I don't know if you've read the stat blocks, but the purple worm is drawn to loud noises, just like a graboid. So if there's a massive battle, there's a fireball, explosions, and cannons. In the middle of a battle, one of these bastards just breaking through and eating somebody, that would just be horrifying, especially if it grabbed at one of the players' characters.
Just
Yeah, and they do. They come right out of the ground, they eat, and then they leave. So you end up chasing down this carved tunnel.
or we could like, keep this concept, but instead of being like a smaller form of a purple worm, they're actually like a larva of a remoras.
That's the one that does the fire aura and is like a big skittering crawler, right? Like a bunch of legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, I really thought this is cool. I've been trying to do more to include reactions in legendary actions that don't necessarily do damage, but just give additional effects. My favorite so far right now is the imposing figure. I think that's really cool. The fact that this can devour somebody and then just run away, because that's all it does. It wants to eat and leave. So it's going to eat and run. So now the players have to end up chasing anybody that gets devoured while they're trying to get out, assuming they don't get digested.
which might turn into another dungeon.
Actually, it turns into an encounter. Would you like to tell us about this encounter that I made?
We have an encounter here, and it's called Got Worms?
Check, please.
During the character's travels through a foul tick-infested swamp, gross, they stumble across splattered piles of blood organs and the skeletal remains of some sort of creature. A successful DC 14 intelligence nature check identifies the remains as belongings to a large warg. If the characters go looking or are able to spot with a DC 14 intelligence investigation check or a wisdom perception check, they identify scattered blood in a general direction. A successful DC 15 survival check leads them to an opening with 3 dead wargs lying on the ground, panting heavily, and their bodies are severely bloated. On a failed survival check, they stumble into some eye rot shrubs.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, that's one of our monster variants that we had a while ago. It gives them the eye rot condition, and they don't actually find the monster.
Gross.
So they failed to. That's supposed to capture
Yeah.
them failing to find whatever they were tracking. Anyways.
Thank you for actually putting that in, because I was like, I don't really know what that would be. A successful DC 17 medicine check confirms the wargs are already dead. The heavy panting is coming from something slithering underneath, struggling to escape. Ugh. If the bloated corpses take any damage or are disturbed in any way, they immediately each one of the 3 release a young purple worm, which is what we just covered. A successful DC 13 intelligence nature check confirms the creature's extremely potent and valuable toxin within its stinger. A character with the poisoner's kit can harvest a single dose of purple worm poison with a successful DC 19 check. On a failure, the character is subjected to the poison and must make a DC 19 Constitution saving throw, taking 42 or 12d6 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one.
All right. What do you think about this, Matt?
I always feel like the people going after the poison, again, I don't know what they do to actually get poisoned themselves, whether they like inject it, like poke themselves with a needle. It's never nice or nasty. But no, I like it. I always liked these sort of like when players encounter a monster that they fight quite often and finding that monster dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, what is going on here? Is it what killed these that typically we have to fight or struggle with?
My favorite part is the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, by all means, please.
I was gonna say my favorite part is definitely the. You think they're alive, but upon closer inspection, they're like, these things aren't alive. There's something alive in them. That's the issue we're running into.
Yeah.
So this was an interesting design for me because there's no real details on how creatures are made. The only one I really found was the beholder, creating other beholders by dreaming. Well, the worm doesn't really say how they come into existence, so I wrote something for our patrons. If you don't know, I write these out in full pages. I give them lore, I give them background, I even give them details that you can roll to reveal to your players depending on the checks. And so I came up with this idea that these giant purple worms regurgitate these seeds onto creatures or onto plant life or things the other creatures will eat, and then they grow inside of something as like a symbiotic relationship.
It's like a very
until
Alien.
very much off Aliens, until it's so big it devours the inside. And
Very gruesome.
and it just burst free from them. So now instead of tracking these wargs, you are now fighting these ginormous worms. And I cannot take credit for this. I was playing Baldur's Gate 3, and I was fighting some hyenas, and some gnolls popped out of them. Newly birthed gnolls. And I was like, oh, that's such an awesome idea. I got to do that. So I came up with this. What do you guys think about the idea of the poison? I wanted to include that because that's a really uncommon thing to find in shops. So to fight a creature, it requires a check though. You're not likely you're going to lose it if you do a crappy job. It reminded me of like snake venom. When they harvest the snake venom, you do it wrong, you could get yourself and kill yourself, and then not even get what you were looking for.
I'm pretty sure that's kind of within the DMG about like when it comes to like recovering poisons. It's like it's a balancing act to not accidentally like get it all over you, particularly with acids. Trying to harvest acids.
Right.
I kept
But no, it's good because players love poison. I mean,
It works.
I kept on thinking of that meme actually that popped up on D&D page for a while of a guy going, "The poison my blade's most deadly." Cameron just licked it.
That's funny.
I was thinking that clip as well.
Well, I think that'll do it for our encounter of the podcast. Got worms.
Now, our magic item of the podcast today is the Sword of Famine and Feast. That's still a unique name right there already.
Well, not really. It was the Sword of Feast and Famine is a magic card, and I used it for inspiration. So I just moved it around so Watsy couldn't sue me.
Well, I just meant from the standpoint of it sounds epic.
It does sound epic.
A unique weapon with mirrored twin blades. One an obsidian black, the other as green as the mold. It's a sword, obviously. Very,
It's a sword.
very rare. You gain a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with this weapon. While you're attuned to it, you have resistance to both poison and acid damage. When you hit a creature with this weapon, it must succeed on a DC 10 con save or gain 1 level of exhaustion, and you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the con modifier, your con modifier.
Yeah.
Wow.
This doesn't have very many features, but the one that it does have will kick the enemies in the dick.
I'm sorry.
But
exhaustion?
But it's a D10, so that's
Yeah, I guess that's
easy.
fair,
It's a
but-
DC 10.
Even a wizard can make it.
Yeah, so it's very low chance. I mean, but what do you think, Matt?
yeah. I think exhaustion is a mechanic that isn't played around with enough. I think it's slapping your players with exhaustion or players having the ability to slap monsters with exhaustion is
terrifying.
It's fun.
It
yeah,
is.
and I think it allows for like good sort of like synergies. Like if there's like some bards that can sort of give like or like hexes that give them like disadvantage on Constitution saving throws.
I like
just
that.
because once you get 1 point of exhaustion, it's not going anywhere.
No.
Yeah, it's done real quick.
I recall one of the most miserable game sessions I had in Adventures League was early on. We started in the bar. My barbarian was, being fruit bat and drinking a lot of alcohol. Did he even made me roll a con save? I rolled a 1. So I got exhaustion right off the bat before we even started the entire encounter, and it kept on getting worse and worse. I kept on failing checks I would normally make because I kept on rolling low single digits. I was like, "Oh, come on!" And that was a very miserable day for me.
Yeah, that was just a extra hard booze there. I see.
Exhausting.
10 cool points. That's worth a golf clap. Good job. I like that.
Actually, I think you ran that game.
Yeah, that was probably my fault then. My bad.
I do like the I agree with the whole back to the weapon, I guess. The synergy thing where it's like all you have to do is just hit the creature. and it has to make that check, right? So like if you're playing like a fighter, or someone in your party's playing a fighter, they're gonna hit this thing a lot.
I was gonna say it's worth noting that it's only like a +1 bonus to attack and damage.
Yeah.
That's why, even though it's a very rare weapon, that should at least be like a +2.
Yep.
Part of the reason was because of the chance to exhaust something is that's punishing. The first it's only ability checks, I think, right? And then is it movement or is it attack rolls?
I think
I think it's yeah. I think next one's movement, and then
and then I think it goes to
But
attack
anyways,
rolls. It's one or the other.
It's one of the few
It goes
weapons that can
downhill.
kill something without needing to attack its hit points.
Yeah, there's some boss monsters that would be in some fear of this thing because just a few low rolls and they're like, oh wow, that's not good.
Originally, when I designed it, I put the DC at 5 and then wanted it to go up every time it was struck with it. So if you failed a 5, it would be now 10, increasing the likelihood. I was like, I'll go with static. I ain't going to try to figure out the logistics of making that
Or like
right out.
12 or 13 maybe.
You have 1 ability checks, 2 speed halves, 3 disadvantage on attacks and saves, 4 HP halved, 5 speed 0, 6 death.
Yeah. So it's dangerous. It really
And I mean,
is.
at some point, it's at disadvantage after the third one, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
You messed up now. You done pissed me off. Let me break out my sword of famine and feast. And it's nice that it gives you some extra temporary hit points too.
You messed up, Aaron.
All right, I think that'll do it for our magic item, the sword of famine and feast. Matt, do you have the show notes open?
Yeah, I do. Indeed.
Would you like to tell us
me
about the
take
DM tip?
Dungeon Master's tip?
Yeah.
Yeah, by me. Yeah. So this is actually, this is good because I very much agree in making it yours. So when running a campaign in the Forgotten Realms or another published setting, always remember it is your campaign. You should never limit your creativity to what a module or book says. You can and should change aspects of the setting you don't like, incorporate more elements you're familiar with, and add your own distinctive touch to it. While altering a published campaign setting to suit your needs, it can be tricky if players are well informed of the lore.
Yep.
Just let them know ahead of time that things will change, and what is likely true in the setting's normal lore may not be true here. This can avoid arguments with your players that know the world in and out, but this is why they're called guides, using the springboards for your own sort of imagination and creativity.
I like that a lot.
And I can also see that being a good tip, too, just from the standpoint of, okay, you're running a campaign that's set in the Forgotten Realms, but let's say the DM is a relatively new player, or, well, DM in this case, who's new to D&D in general, and they don't know much about the Forgotten Realms, so...
I've been that person. I've been at the table with the person that does know all that, and I've decided to make a decision off the cuff just to push the story forward, and it was the wrong decision according to the person that knew exactly how those villains are or those people are and where they live, because I don't remember what the argument was. It was
Well, you're in the wrong multiverse apparently, because
Yeah,
in this
right?
world that rule didn't apply.
right.
I'm sorry, but the Dark Elves are not in the Underdark. Actually, it's the humans this time. Sorry, I don't
And-
make the rules.
And this really comes up a lot in my games because I am very free roam. While I try to understand and read all the stuff, honestly, I forget most of it. And it is just so much work for me to remember it all. I find it's just easier to just be like, I'm going to change this. Why? Because I don't have to worry about remembering exactly what it says. But I do that when I run the adventures. When I did Storm King's Thunder, I changed a lot of stuff. And I got even more with Descent into Avernus, because I think both of these guys have the book. So I'm like, well,
I never actually read it,
I'm
though,
going to be
so-
honest. I don't like this part, so I'm going to get rid of that. That's too much extra work. This is too far from the story. And I really narrowed it down because A, I wanted to finish it in a reasonable time frame. And B, I wanted to not have to memorize all that stuff and remember it.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
mean,
lazy.
so I kind of have like I guess an interesting take as someone who kind of writes adventures.
Right.
But I am 100% of the mindset that like the adventure you write has this sort of idealized perfect player group who will go through and they will touch on all the bits of lore, but realistically that doesn't exist.
Right.
No.
The adventures I write are designed to kind of be torn apart, and if any aspect has been kind of incorporated into the table, I'm kind of happy with that. So again, it kind of leans into the fact that like they're not like lore documents or that you have to follow bit by bit, and if you slip up one part, they're gonna like take away your character sheet.
They're going to cut off your dice.
Yeah.
No,
Set your
Make it
books
your
on
own.
fire.
I think this comes across really well when we run Jeff Stevens stuff, because he's always like, "Man, I love what you did. It was different. It was great. It took some of the core aspects and you twisted it. It really happened." We got a lot of compliments. I think it was Phil Beckwith that wrote the Haunt. I recorded that session one night. And he was super. I mean, he got nothing but glowing recommendations of how well I ran it. And honestly, I took the core of the story and was just like, I don't want to remember all this stuff, so I'm just going to make it up as I go. But he loved the way it came out, and especially the way I did the little doll. You know, I described her climbing up their arms and stabbing people, and it was a lot of fun. And I can only do that because, A, I have a terrible memory, so I just have accepted my weakness, pure and simple. In fact, we just ran on Friday. We had our bi-weekly game, and I forgot an entire quest that I gave them the episode before. I have no idea how that happened.
You know what's
I
funny?
had it written down.
All of us forgot it.
Yeah, except
all of
for
us
one
here.
person.
And the
It
one
never existed.
Yeah, yeah. The only person who remembered was the one who's not sitting here right now.
So I'm all about this, and I really think that
They kind of just gave us a car, and then we just kind of said, we don't need the car.
Well,
anyways,
Let me be fair, we also did epically fail on checks, and the enemies rolled really good.
yeah. That was sad. I wanted you
They
to have
did
your little
roll
death machine
really
a little
good.
longer. Anyways, so
We'll get another one.
that'll do it for our Dungeon Master tip. Thank you, Matt, for making it yours.
Woo!
See what I did there? Because he took the... No? Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever, guys. All right. So, our player tip of the podcast is...
Don't be a dick.
And you can avoid dickitude by role-playing your dwarf. Proudly declaring they were made from the planet itself, dwarves share many qualities with the stone they love. They are strong, hardy, and dependable. They value their long-held... Actually, I think it's ironic that I just went into this all after saying make the story your own. Happy accident. They value their long-held traditions, which are they preserve as fiercely as they defend their magnificently carved mountains. Dwarves believe in significance of clan and family ties. They have a hearty respect for their elders, and they honor long-departed clan founders and heroes. They place great value on wisdom and experience above all else. Some are so more than others. Dwarves seek guidance and protection from their gods. They love to they look to them for divine strength, hope, inspiration, or they seek to appease cruel or destructive gods. I love the idea of dwarves sacrificing people to a monstrous god that, you know,
They're like,
shakes
"Hey,
their entire continent.
I just don't want you to tear down my mountain. That's it. I like my mountain.
Individual dwarves might be impious or openly sacrilegious, but temples or shrines are found in almost every single dwarven society. Dwarves' memories are long-lasting as the mountains, thus they never forget their enemies, either individuals that have wronged them or entire races. I think there's a really popular long-running feud between dwarves and elves, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you've done their ill to their kind, they're not likely to forget it. Unfortunately, this mentality reveals itself most evidently in their fierce hatred for orcs, which are often inhabit the same mountains, which often wreak devastation upon dwarf communities. So there's constant, button heads. Dwarves also despise giants and titans because the dwarf race was once labored as giants as slaves. They feel a mixture of pity and disgust towards those that have been corrupted, such as the Azures and the Galeb Durs, who still have not freed themselves from the giant's chains. To a dwarf, it is a gift and a mark of deep respect to stand beside an ally in war, and a sign of genuine devotion to shield that ally from an enemy. Dwarven legends honor many heroes who have gave their lives to save their clans and their friends. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
Did I get it?
You did?
Yep.
That sound good?
Oh, yeah.
Sounds good to me.
What'd I miss, Matt?
I didn't see anything messed. Yeah.
That lore
love
sound
me a
good?
dwarf.
You love your dwarf? I've only played a dwarf once, I'm gonna be honest. And one thing that I really liked about playing a dwarf is that I got to make references of hard stuff all the time. And granted, I was young kid, and I was dirty minded and everything. So everything he was always talking about how big his shut up, always talking about how big his hammer is, and nobody's hammer's bigger than his, and it was stupid. But it's the only time I ever played a dwarf, and I kind of look back on that and wish maybe I'll have to play another one and take some of these details into my character's design or my character's concept, because there's a lot here that really, despite their love for stone, it really is a group who just loves their family.
Yep.
More than
I would
most.
love to play a dwarf that's been ratioed to the size of like a humanoid. So I'm just some hulking behemoth of a man, and I'm just like, they're like looking at you like, what are you? Are you like the son of a giant? No, I'm a dwarf. And they all look at you like, huh?
We had a character concept that
Giant dwarf.
It's just a giant dwarf.
that Ryan had played, where he says we called the giant dwarf, but he was just a human raised by dwarfs.
Yep.
So
That's funny.
was there any? What do you think about this player tip, Matt?
No, I think it's always trying to like balance between like the particular races that have like the inbuilt history, that whole rivalries between other races that can sometimes make clashes at the table, particularly like but it also gives itself for like, the classic, Gimli and Legolas friendship arc.
Absolutely.
It's all things that you kind of negotiate at this kind of the start. My first character I ever played was a dwarf. Ulfgar Iron Axe, or the Dwarven Blender.
Blender.
He had like 2 axes and would just spin into combat.
Oh my god, like Taz.
Yeah, but that's kind of great. Is they lend themselves to like hearty, get in there and fight, and
They
as
like
I
a
said,
good
leaning on their being like honourable, and supporting your friends. It's they mesh in parties quite well.
Yeah.
I remember one time where we were playing a game of Pathfinder with an old group I used to game with, and one player was playing a dwarven cleric. He was giving his backstory. Yep, I found this new deity, thought me out of good points. I had a conversation with my mom. She disagreed with it, so I left home. Now I'm studying word as God. Okay, another player. I thought you dwarves communicated by screaming at each other and throwing things. Is that not a conversation?
All right, I think that'll do it for our player tip of the podcast.
Don't be a dick.
Role-playing a dwarf. I decided to do the role-playing stuff again because I realized we did the drow and that was it. And I've been doing a lot of mechanic-heavy stuff lately, so I thought I'd go to the more role-play stuff.
Something more roleplay. Yeah, makes sense.
All right, so before we close out today, we have another gift to give away. Ian, do you want to tell us about it?
Why, yes. A masked menace terrifies their region. The adventurers stumble into her scheme, the kidnapping of a famous performer known as Dmsguild. Their mission is to deliver a ransom and collect Devon. And today's winner is Django Fett.
Love that name.
That's an awesome name, I gotta say.
And the best part is it's spelled with a D.
Congratulations, Django Fett. If you enjoy the product, please leave Jeff Stevens a review. That's one of the best things you can do for a content creator. Helps them improve their product, and it lets other people that are on the fence get a look at what other people think. So, if you didn't win, have no fear. Head on over to critacademy.com/Jeff Stevens and get more fat loots, compliments of Jeff. Now, before we close out today, Matt, would you like to give yourself one more plug? Tell people where they can find you, what some of the cool stuff they should check out.
Yeah, sure, by all means. I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes on Twitter, or just Matthew Whitby on the Dmsguild. I have a whole bunch of adventures and other products that I highly encourage people to check out. In particular, one of my newest adventures, Tyke's Torment, which was a collaboration with me and Ginny Loveday, as edited by Sadie Lowry, and it was a fantastic team to work with. I'm kind of really chuffed with how it turned out.
You can see above his head. There should be an image there. I think I put it there.
Hold it.
Yeah, there you go. It's just above your left shoulder.
I don't know my.
You're right. I don't. You know what? Never mind. It's above Matt. There, you'll see it there.
Both hands.
There you go. You'll also find a link to that stuff in our show notes at critacademy.com/post/episode 193. All right. that'll do it for our show today. Please join us in our next episode where we'll be discussing Cobalt Press's Warlock Grimoire 2. You taking a look at that yet?
I've skimmed through it.
What did you think?
There's good stuff in there.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. Sorry, I only have one copy, so... so you're going to have to wait. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to support us, visit critacademy.com. Follow us on social media at Crit Academy, and please consider leaving us a review. I am your host, Justin.
And I'm your guest, Matthew Whitby. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
And I'm your co-host, Ian.
And I'm your co-host, Austin.
Keep your blades sharp and spells prepared, heroes.